been some time now to think about this. Actually, there's been quite a bit of time to think about this. And the more I think about it, the more I'm wondering, what is it that they're doing here? Good morning to you. Good Thursday morning. I'm Dejan Kovacevic of DK Pittsburgh Sports. This is Daily Shot of Steelers. It comes your way bright and early every weekday. If you're into hockey and or baseball, I also offer daily shots. Penguins and Pirates in the same place that you found this. Another day passed with no resolution of any kind on the quarterback front, and that's because the Steelers haven't heard back from Aaron Rodgers, and for that matter, neither has anybody else. The Giants, who are his known other suitor, and the Vikings, who have either been manufactured into or genuinely emerged as a third suitor yesterday. Nobody. The Daily Mail of London happened to have a photographer for some reason on the beach in Malibu, California, and took a picture of Rodgers just walking barefoot through the sand, looking wistful, looking contemplative, and that's about as newsy as anything got. But I'm going to ask you this again. What are they doing? They need a quarterback, and they don't need just one. And they've made clear, at least to Mason Rudolph's representation, that nothing's going to happen on that front until something happens with Rodgers. I kind of get that, but not really. See, the easy dialogue here is to look at Rodgers' age, say he's going to be 42 years old, and you can look at his statistics from the 2024 season with the 28 touchdown passes, 3,897 yards passing, and you can say, well, how can they afford to reject something like that or to at least not pursue it? But I've got a completely opposing view here, and that's how can they afford to do it? And even if they can afford to do it, is it the right move? I'm going to try this in practical terms first, because the Steelers have now signed several other players through free agency. If it wasn't for the trade and sign of DK Metcalf, we wouldn't know any of these individuals' names, but there have been some others. Malik Harrison coming in as a linebacker, Darius Slay, veteran corner, coming in just yesterday officially. Harrison at $5 million, Slay at $10 million. And by my own back of the napkin accounting, that cap space that had been over $60 million is now under $30 million. And I'll always throw in the asterisk that every GM, and this includes every GM the Steelers have had, keeps around $10 million to sign their draft picks, which has to be done, and to preserve something of an emergency pool for the regular season. So now we're under $20 million. Rodgers' pay with the Jets last season was $37.5 million. Now, that doesn't mean he'll get that amount again, but it doesn't mean he won't. And even if he knocks his price tag down from 37 to, say, 30 or even 25 or something, he's eating up the whole rest of the cap because you still have to go and get that other quarterback, whoever that happens to be, whether it's Rudolph or anyone. And that's the part, maybe even more than anything else that anyone could bring up about Rodgers on the field, some of the really lousy stuff he's done off the field, because I look at that same pile of cash and think about what could be done with it. Meaning not, signing TJ Watt or whatever. I've said repeatedly, there's all kinds of ways to sign TJ. I just mean, for the next kickoff. Can anyone really look at both sides of the football with this team and say that the Steelers are as strong as they could possibly be? That by finishing off what they've done already, by signing Rodgers, that they'll have gotten this all solved. And that, by the way, they'll be addressing the very, very, very real risk that someone in his 40s isn't going to play all of the games. Want to have some fun here? Here, do this with me. Just whatever it is that you've been thinking about this situation beforehand, just give me like 2.5 minutes of a clean slate, okay? You just landed here from Pluto and you're just being made aware of this situation. To me, if you sign Rudolph who incidentally happens to be one of the very few quarterbacks standing who has not yet sat in a musical chair, and you consider the various strengths that I've brought up about Rudolph over the past 24 hours, highlighting that he plays a lot like Ryan Tannehill did in the Arthur Smith offense in Nashville, and I've been told from the inside, meaning not Rudolph's camp, but from the inside, the Steelers world, that that's one of the reasons the Steelers reached out to Rudolph a couple days ago, and you put together a plan that's both short-term and long-term, where Mason is your default starter heading into the 2025 season. But you additionally draft a quarterback that you feel has legit potential and try to work out a deal with another team in the NFL that maybe has somebody who's younger and blocked. So you have Mason and two young guys, thereby doubling your chances of having somebody emerge, maybe. And you draft a quarterback for real, in the 2026 class. You know, the one that's here in Pittsburgh. And you move up if you have to, because you will have options in that class. You don't in this one, to move up and really get somebody. Now, all of a sudden, you've got 3 kids, 4 kids, and you have, for the first time since, my goodness, I can't even remember. Because even at the time Ben Roethlisberger came in, he was doing so with other veterans. That's what you need to do to find your future franchise quarterback. You need to throw a lot of them against the wall. Or, pick first overall and get Joe Burrow, but I'm not liking the odds of that. Now, however much you'd want to spend on a quarterback, you're not going to in this setting, because Mason's not going to cost you anything. Mason made $2.875 million with the Titans this past season. I can't imagine that he'd cost a whole lot more than that, and if you were to give him 2 or 3 years, then he could hang around and be a good veteran backup for you once one of the kids is ready. From there, and this is the part that gets fun, you start envisioning, all right, go and get yourself a right guard to make sure that you're pushing Mason McCormick or even replacing him if he's ineffective. Get yourself a top flight swing tackle, someone who can not only back up Broderick Jones and Troy Fautanu, but unseat Jones if necessary. How much of an impact do you think that'll have on the team? You can go and get Cooper Kupp. You can have a wide receiving core that's got Metcalf, George Pickens, Calvin Austin, and Kupp. I got to tell you, whatever it is that you think of Mason as a quarterback, whether it's an outdated thought, whether it's an unfair thought, meaning judging him because they wouldn't let him play, or whether it's an accurate thought that reflects on how he actually did before departing or how he carried himself in Nashville behind an absolutely awful overall offense, you'd have to concede that that makes a quarterback's life a whole heck of a lot simpler. We don't have to wonder, we saw how Mason connected with Pickens. We saw how I saw it off the field and in other scenarios, how Mason worked with Pickens behind the scenes and had Pickens eating out of his figurative hand. Something that, by the way, I hadn't seen any other quarterback accomplish since George has been here. I could see adding more quality on the defensive side as well, especially up front, even before the draft. But none of these things are plausible at all if you're waiting around with your thumbs up your rear end, embarrassing the team in front of your own fan base, no less, hoping and praying that the 41-year-old will say yes. Come on. Be a whole hell of a lot better than that. When we come back, J1Q.
This segment of Daily Shot is brought to you by our good friends at Mike's Beer Bar. They're located on Federal Street, directly across from PNC Park. Mike has more than 500 beers on tap, including from more than 50 local breweries. Stop in and say hello. Tell Mike we sent you. Mike's Beer Bar.
Today's J1Q comes from George. He says, DK, notwithstanding the potential return of Mason Rudolph, ostensibly as QB2, and in lawyer parlance, as I've been practicing for 39 years, and absent Omar Khan pulling a rabbit out of his hat, do you agree that this quarterback debacle is GM malpractice, and in some NFL circles would be grounds for dismissal. We know the Steelers don't operate in that fashion, but apparent failure on quarterback plans A, B, C, and D is not a good look. And I really think that needs to be considered. I'm not talking about firing Omar or whatever. That's not going to happen, as you point out. That's just not who the Steelers are. But I am talking about all of your various quarterback plans that you're citing, because this wasn't the first bungling at the most important position. Now, I'm hardly going to connect Omar to the drafting of Kenny Pickett. That, of course, was Kevin Colbert's last act as GM. But everybody else who's come along has either not been good enough, or in the case of Justin Fields, depending on your perspective, was good enough but not retained. And he was allowed to leave, as you're pointing out with all your lettered plans there, without Khan having even contacted Rudolph, specifically, the one that we know about, until this week, which gives away that there was no plan B. All of that's bad. In fact, that's really bad. But I have some news for you here. It has not necessarily bottomed out in terms of its badness, because there's still another level or two levels of badness awaiting. They could go ahead and commit $1 gazillion to Rodgers and his wonky hamstrings and his crappy attitude and his age. They also could, in doing so, blow other opportunities. I glanced over this in the opening segment, but I don't get why the Rudolph signing would be contingent on anything having to do with Rodgers, because you're going to need another quarterback. Or two. They don't have any. And please stop referencing Skylar Thompson. He's on a futures contract. They don't have a quarterback on the roster. This is all so stupid. And I'm not saying that from the standpoint of where they are on the calendar. They obviously don't have to play a game for quite a while. I'm saying it from the standpoint of the very real set of circumstances that is surrounding them, that is swarming on them, related to the sport's most important position. They have somehow blown all of this, and then at the end of it decided it was a great time to cede control of the process to someone who, in all likelihood, would not make anywhere near the difference that one would expect for all that trouble. Get Rudolph here and then get working on adding as many gifted young quarterbacks as possible. And while you're at it, take all this money that you were prepared to light on fire for Rodgers and make the rest of the 2025 roster significantly stronger. I appreciate the question. I appreciate everybody checking out Daily Shot of Steelers. And be sure, by the way, to tune in to our live show, the video, this afternoon. That's at 4 p.m. Eastern, the Double Shot of Steelers.